Adam Chambers, welcome to you. We just watched your leader, Aaron O'Toole. He was very critical of this, saying he didn't do enough to deal with inflation and the housing crisis. This is a fiscal update, as Amanda was just talking about. What was missing here? What did you expect to see from a fiscal update? It's not a mini budget.
Well, Evan, I think what I'm hearing at home in Simcoe North from my constituents is about the affordability crisis. So I think the document was relatively tone deaf on the risks of inflation and, in particular, housing affordability, which we understand is a huge problem. Nothing about how to increase supply. Yes, I agree that as a fiscal update, it's not supposed to be a mini budget, but we know that these are the concerns that Canadians have. There wasn't much really to allay these concerns of Canadians, that the government's actually focused on the affordability crisis or worried about the risks of inflation over the near term. In fact, this government's actually predicting that inflation is going to come back down, back to the 2% level in a few months. And the risk of that not happening is going to make it even more life more unaffordable for Canadians.
Okay, what would you like to see? Let's talk about housing supply, because the Liberals have a $4 billion housing plan. They've also got a $70 billion plan to build houses. But housing supply is very difficult. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market, as you said. What would the Conservatives have liked to see to increase the supply? Because trying almost everything that, frankly, the Conservatives and the Liberals have both proposed to help people get into homes, and first-time home buyers are having a heck of a time doing it, there's no question. But it actually, with the low interest rates, it actually increases the demand. It doesn't actually help the supply. So what could they do on the supply side?
Evan, you're exactly right. There are supply issues and demand issues. And frankly, when we talk about demand issues like allowing people to take more money out of an RRSP, as an example, all that does is increase the demand for housing. In fact, increases prices. So yes, we do need to focus on supply, and you nailed it. It's a multi-government issue. It's provinces, municipalities, and the federal government. In the last campaign, Conservatives put forward a very reasonable proposition, which was to review government buildings and figure out which of these buildings we could release to the market to increase housing and supply. We also looked at ways to make or incentivize builders of apartment buildings, as an example, to increase the level of supply. So I think that's exactly what we need to be thinking about versus some of these demand side issues, which is only going to push the price of housing up. We also need to encourage Canadians to move to where there is not a constriction of supply in markets. So I think one of the good things coming out of COVID is the increase of telecommuting. We should be looking at some of these, secondary markets across the country to say, that's where some of this growth should happen.
What did you make of a couple things? The potential Omicron response, they've got $4.5 billion. Your finance critic and your party is saying you got to stop the spending. It's causing inflation. It's Justin Trudeau's inflation issue. And yet here we are facing Omicron, facing possible new restrictions. Were the Conservatives too quick to start ending everything, sort of declaring that this is over and time to move on, when we might be right back into it? Does your party have to recalibrate stop the supports now when restrictions may be coming back?
Well, look, it's important to take a prudent approach to how we come out of this pandemic. And, look, as far as Omicron, there's a lot we don't know. I'm relatively optimistic, but we can't base projections on that. So, is it prudent to take an additional charge for the potential that Omicron is worse? Absolutely. But what we need to figure out is how we're going to focus on economic growth coming out of this. This document doesn't really focus on growth. It really is more of a, here's additional money we're going to put into the marketplace across a bunch of different programs, $72 billion worth of new spending. The truth is, it's been over 10 years since the government's even reviewed any of its own spending across government departments. So it's not that we're saying, all the measures in this package are bad. We're saying is the government's spending about $500 billion a year. That's coming down to $400 billion over the next couple of years, and then going back up to $500 billion. Surely there are programs that we can look at to say, look, if we have new priorities, we need to fund First Nations welfare and education. Like we can absolutely do that, but we need to look at other places that
Okay,
we can cut back to fund
listen,
priorities.
Listen, we just had an election, and I asked Aaron O'Toole, okay, cut some program spending, go through it, and we asked several times what programs should be cut. We didn't get an answer. So, okay, is there one program that the Conservatives say time to cut? What is it?
Well, look, the government is spending $500 billion a year right now. They've been in power for 6 years, adding spending every single year. So when in 2015, I think total federal spending was about $300 billion. So, Evan, you do the math and let me know whether you think that 35 or 40% increase in permanent spending is value for money. I don't think it is.
Listen, sir, listen, it's not my math. Like, I'm going to show you a clip back in April. I asked the Conservative leader if he supports all that. I know you guys are now saying roll back the spending. It's all causing inflation, but I think, Rachel, we've got this clip. Here's Aaron O'Toole saying he supported all the spending. Get out the door, get it quickly. I'm just trying to figure out what shouldn't have been done. Do we have this Aaron O'Toole clip? Let's run this clip if we have it.
Well, as you know, we've supported all of the programs to help Canadians throughout the pandemic, Evan. In fact, some cases we voted in favor of getting money and support out to people, even though we knew there were problems with the program, and then we tried to fix them afterwards.
Okay, so again, this is in April. Aaron O'Toole saying we voted for all the programming, we wanted it out faster, we knew there'd be problems. So now you're saying we want to cut. I'm just trying to figure out, what is it? Is it spend or is it cut? What is the Conservatives' position here?
It's a good question, Evan. We absolutely had to step up to help Canadians. So if you want to know what Conservatives might have done differently, we probably wouldn't have given $7 billion to publicly traded companies who were buying back shares, increasing executive compensation, and paying dividends. That's $7 billion that we went out the door to companies that didn't need it, didn't deserve it. So there's $7 billion right there. We gave money to university students who, paid them to stay home and not work last summer. That's a significant amount of money that went out the door to people who didn't need it there either. So, yes, should we have spent? Absolutely. Did we need to spend as much as we did? Probably not.
Okay, I got to jump to your leader who's scrumming, and then we've got Chrystia Freeland here. So Conservative Deputy Finance and Middle Class Prosperity Critic Adam Chambers. Sir, I really appreciate you joining us.